Buy Sri Lanka's best internet package for online learning and online working with many amazing offers. Call 1212 for more information. Sri Lanka Telecom.
ලෙන්ගතුකම වැඩි කරගන්න ලව්ජු රුපියල් 50ට අඩු කළා.
මාමේ එන්න අපිට එකක් බොමු.
Tonight, past dues. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa tables 1.3 trillion rupee vote on account in Parliament for 4 months of expenditure and settling unpaid bills. Not taking it lying down, government MPs take aim at divisive comments by Jaffna District MP C.V. Vigneswaran.
He lived 65 years among the Sinhalese and the Muslims and had the audacity to go to Jaffna and say the Sinhalese and the Muslims have no right to live in Jaffna.
Ignoring our pleas, ex-SIS Chief Nilantha Jayawardena says ignorance by higher-ups on calls for action empowered Easter attacks. Big money. Police reveal massive 2.6 billion in drug profits have circulated through arrested racketeers' bank accounts. All this and much more coming up on this Thursday, the 27th of August, 2020.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9.
නව sunlight sakura. Then දික්කුකල් පවතින sakura මල් සුවඳින්.
Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Shanila Fernando in your top stories for tonight. A vote on account to meet government expenditure for the next 4 months was tabled in Parliament today, seeking a sum not exceeding 1.3 trillion rupees as well as a further sum of 750 billion rupees which will be funded through the issuing of treasury bills. Prime Minister and Finance Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa stated that unpaid dues left over from the previous government amounting to 242 billion rupees remains to be sorted out by the present regime, which has added more pressure to the country's already struggling finances.
Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, in his capacity as Minister of Finance, tabled the vote on account for the next 4 months in Parliament today. Through the vote on account, the government has sought approval for an amount not exceeding rupees 1.3 trillion for government expenditure from 1st September until the new budget is approved. A resolution to borrow a further amount not exceeding 750 billion rupees through the issue of treasury bills has also been submitted. The debate on the vote on account will continue tomorrow as well.
විශ්වයි 14 රට බාර දෙනකොට රටේ ආර්ථික වර්ධන වේගය 5% අතර පැවතුණා. විශ්වයි 19 අවසාන වන විට දකුණු ආසියාවේ අඩුම ආර්ථික වර්ධනයේ මට්ටමට වෙනවා. 2% දක්වා අඩු වෙලා තිබුණා. නොපිය වූ බිල්පත් රුපියල් බිලියන 242ක් මේ අවුරුද්දේ අපිට දරා ගන්න සිද්ධ වෙලා තියෙනවා. විශ්වයි 19 දී අයවැගේ හිඟය 6.6.8 කියලා වාර්තා වුණා. බිල්පත් එක්ක 9ට වඩා වැඩි අගයක් ගන්න. මේක බිල්පත් ගෙවන්න සංශෝධන පෙබරවාරි මාසයේදී මා විසින් ඉදිරිපත් කරන්නට සූදානම් වුණා. මොකද එදා බහුතර බලයක් තිබුණා. අද විපක්ෂය ඒකට බාධා කළා. එවැනි තත්ත්වයක් තුල තමයි අද සිද්ධ වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. 2020 වර්ෂය වෙනුවෙන් දෙවන පරිපූර්ණක හස්තමේන්තුවක් මේ සභාවට ඉදිරිපත් කරන්න. අපි දීපු පොරොන්දු නිසි ආකාරව ඉටු කරන නිසා අපි ඡන්දයට කලින් දෙන්න පොරොන්දු වුණු රැකියාව 1,60,000 ඡන්ද ඉවර වෙලා සති දෙකක් තුල දෙන්න පටන් ගත්තා. අපි මේ නිර්මාණය කරපු ශ්‍රම බලකාය කාර්යාල වලට සීමා වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඔන්තිමේ හැකියාවන් සන්නද්ධව බලකායක් කරනවා. ඒ තුලින් සමාජයේ දුප්පත් පවුල් සයිබල් ගන්නනවා. අපේ විදේශ සංචිත භාවිතා කරලා තියෙන්නේ අත්‍යවශ්‍ය නොවන භාණ්ඩ ආනයන කිරීම සඳහා. මේ හේතුව නිසා අපේ විනිමය අනුපාත අනවශ්‍ය ලෙස උච්චාවරණය වෙනවා. මේ පිළිබඳව හොඳින් අවබෝධ කරගෙන අපි ආනයන අත්‍යවශ්‍ය භාණ්ඩ වලට පමණක් සීමා කරලා තියෙනවා. මේ තුලින් විනිමය අනුපාතය ස්ථාවර මට්ටමකට පවත්වාගෙන අපිට හැකි වෙලා තියෙනවා. ජනාධිපතිතුමා ඇතුළු අපේ රජය මේ වගකීමට උර දෙන්නේ ඒ පිළිබඳව හොඳ අවබෝධයකින්.
මේ කොවිඩ් අර්බුදය එන්න පෙර පළවෙනි මාස 3ේදී ආර්ථිකයේ වර්ධනය ඍණ 1.6යි. මේ සියලුම ආර්ථික අර්බුදයන් කොවිඩ් එකට මුවා වෙලා යට කරන්න බෑ. රුපියල පාලනය කිරීම සඳහා ආනයන තහනමක් දියත් කරලා තියෙනවා. කිසිම ආකාරයක විද්‍යානුකූල ක්‍රමවේදකින් තොරව සහ මුලින්ම ආනයන නතර කිරීම විසින් රටේ ආර්ථිකයට ඇති කරලා තියෙන බලපෑම ඉතාම ප්‍රබලයි. මේ අර්බුදයෙන් ගැලවෙන්නට රජයට සිද්ධ වෙනවා අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම රාජ්‍ය සේවයේ වියදම් කප්පාදු කරන්න, වැටුප් කප්පාදු කරන්න, රජයේ දේපොළ විකිණීමට අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම සිද්ධ වෙනවා.
Meanwhile, during the debate on the vote on account, comments were also made on the statement made by parliamentarians C.V. Vigneswaran and Gajendra Kumar Ponnambalam during the inaugural sitting of the parliament on the 20th of this month. During the session, State Minister, retired Rear Admiral Dr. Sarath Weerasekara delivered a scathing reply to the duo, calling them out on the divisive nature of their remarks.
කතානායකවරයාට සුබ පැතීමේ අවස්ථාවේ විග්නේශ්වරන් මන්ත්‍රීවරයා විසින් සිද්ධ කරන ලද යම් ප්‍රකාශයක් සම්බන්ධයෙන් මම මේ සභාවේ අවධානය යොමු කළා මේ හැන්සාඩ් වාර්තාවෙන් අයින් කරන්න කියලා. එතකොට මම කිව්වේ මේක පාරම්පරික වාසභූමිය ඔවුන්ගේ කියලා කියපු කාරණාව අයින් කරන්න කියලා. මම අහන්නේ දැන් මේක ගැස් හැන්සාඩ් එකේ ගත්තා තියෙනවා.
It's that is not under privilege. ඕනෑම මන්ත්‍රීවරයෙකුට තමන්ගේ මතය ප්‍රකාශ කිරීමේ අයිතිය තියෙනවා.
ඔබතුමා කිව්වා මේ ගැන සලකා බලනවා කියලා. මේට කලිනොත් වැරදි ප්‍රකාශයක් නොගැලපෙන දෙයක් කිව්වොත් ආණ්ඩුක්‍රම ව්‍යවස්ථාව උල්ලංඝනය කරන දෙයක් කිව්වොත් එය හැන්සාඩ් එකෙන් ඉවත් කරලා තියෙනවා. ඒ නිසා අපි ඉල්ලීමක් කරනවා කරුණාකරලා මේක ඉවත් කරන්න කටයුතු කරන්න කියලා.
On the inaugural day of the parliament, one party leader mentioned about self-determination and supremacy of the Tamil language. This August assembly is not a place to decide whether one language is superior than the other language. But we can sympathize with him, thinking that he is clueless about the true history of our mother Lanka. He is asking self-determination to fulfill the aspirations of the Tamil people. Now, if the self-determination given to the north to fulfill the aspiration of the Tamil living in the north, what about the Tamil living in the south? More than 50% of the Tamil people are living in the south among the Sinhalese and the Muslims. Does that mean that he is not concerned about the aspiration of the Tamils living in the south, or he is fully convinced that their aspirations have been already met? This particular member of parliament, when he was holding a very responsible position in Jaffna, he said the Sinhalese and the Muslims have no right to live in Jaffna Peninsula. He went to Royal College and he studied with the Sinhalese. He went to the law college and studied law with the Sinhalese. He lived 65 years among the Sinhalese and the Muslims and had the audacity to go to Jaffna and say the Sinhalese and the Muslims have no right to live in Jaffna. Gajendra Ponnambalam කියන ගරු මන්ත්‍රීවරයා කියනවා අපේ හමුදාව යුද අපරාධ කළා කියලා, දෙමළ සමූල ඝාතනය කළා කියලා. ඒ වගේම තමයි කියනවා ගෝඨාභය ජනාධිපතිතුමා යාපනයේ ඡන්ද ලැබුණ නැත්තේ ඒ සමූල ඝාතනය කළා කියන. මම ඕගෙන් අහන්න කැමතියි මේ සමූල ඝාතනය කළා කියන යුද හමුදාවට නායකත්වය දුන්න සරත් ෆොන්සේකා ජනාධිපති අපේක්ෂකයා වගේ ඉන්නකොට මොනතරම් විශාල සංඛ්‍යාවක් ඡන්ද ලැබුණාද යාපනයේ. ඒක නිසා ඔහුගේ ප්‍රකාශ කවුරුත් ගණන් ගන්නෑ. යුද අපරාධ විශේෂඥයෝ 6 දෙනෙක් සර් ඩෙස්මන්ඩ් සිල්වා, සර් Jeffrey Nice, Professor Michael Crane, Professor Michael Newton, Rodney Dixon, QC and Major General John Nones. මේ 6 දෙනාම කියලා දෙනවා අපි කිසිම යුද අපරාධයක් කළේ නැහැ. I don't want to embarrass these two members of parliament by asking whether they have donated blood to their own people. Whenever the Jaffna Hospital blood bank runs out of blood, it is the Sinhalese soldiers who give blood to the Tamil people. The Vellalas never give blood to the low caste people because they don't want their blood to be mixed up with the low caste. So these are the people who are talking about the aspiration and also about the welfare of the Tamil people. They don't have any right to talk about the aspirations of the Tamil people, and we have all the right to talk about the Tamil people.
Former State Intelligence Service Director Senior DIG Nilantha Jayawardena continued his attack on superior officials in the country's national security establishment during the 19th day of his testimony before the Presidential Commission investigating the Easter Sunday attacks today. The former State Intel Chief told the Commission during cross-examination that had the hierarchy listened to the SIS calls for action against Zaharan Hashim as far back as 2017, there would have been no need for a foreign intelligence agency to warn of any suicide attacks against the country.
The Presidential Commission of Inquiry investigating the Easter Sunday attacks recorded the testimony of former State Intelligence Service Director Senior DIG Nilantha Jayawardena for the 19th day yesterday. At the beginning of his testimony for the day, the former Intel Chief presented technical evidence relating to the 9th April Intelligence Review meeting to the Commission. However, due to the sensitive nature of the information, members of the media were not allowed to cover the session. When media personnel were allowed back in for the sessions, the witness was cross-examined by the attorney representing former Defence Secretary Hemasiri Fernando, President's Counsel Dilshan Jayasuriya. The witness was first asked by the President's Counsel which top official did he report to as the Director of State Intelligence. Senior DIG Jayawardena replied that in his position his responsibilities came directly under Defence Secretary Hemasiri Fernando at the time. The witness explained that during the Defence Secretary's tenure, he had exchanged about 80 phone calls with him, which amounted to an average of 2 to 3 phone calls a day. President's counsel Jayasuriya then asked the witness if he could acknowledge that no written intelligence reports on Zaran Hashim and his followers had been submitted to the Defence Secretary between the 1st to 20th April period. In reply, the witness accepted this statement as correct. The President's counsel then asked the witness if he accepted that the Secretary of Defence had not been given any prior written notice of the attack until the day of the attacks on 21st April, despite receiving a foreign intelligence warning on April 4th. The witness stated that he had not provided any prior written reports on the warning to the Defence Secretary during that time. When asked if he was prepared to acknowledge that despite having not submitted written reports prior to the attack, he had in fact submitted 3 reports after the attack to the Defence Secretary, the witness replied that he had in fact submitted only 2 written reports after the attacks. Further, the witness added that he possessed evidence to prove that he had in fact informed the Defence Secretary over the phone on 7th April with regards to the foreign intelligence warning he had received. President's counsel Jayasuriya then asked the witness why was it that he did not inform the Defence Secretary in writing of such a serious threat at a time the country was enjoying a peaceful period, despite him speaking to his superior 2 or 3 times a day. The witness replied there is no specific requirement for intelligence to be provided to the Defence Secretary in writing. We have provided intelligence to relevant superiors using a variety of methods. We have also spoken of much more serious topics than this over the phone. It was only after 21st April that the need for written documents began to be debated. The witness was then asked if he was prepared to acknowledge that the State Intelligence Service had no prior inkling of an imminent suicide attack until foreign intelligence sources provided such information. He replied, although the State Intelligence Service had no prior knowledge of an attack until it received the foreign alert, the National Intelligence Service had, however, since 2017, provided a total of 347 reports on extremists such as Zaran Hashim to security higher-ups prior to the attacks. He added, we carried out our duties looking ahead. We knew since 2018 that something like this could happen. That is why we requested a special police team to arrest him. As we requested since 2017, necessary steps were taken and Zaran and his followers were arrested. Such foreign intelligence warnings would not have been required. The President's counsel then asked the witness, if, as you say, the National Security Council repeatedly failed to take the necessary action you called for, then is it not the President who is to blame for this more than the other officials? The witness replied, with the President being the chairman of the National Security Council, accordingly, the lion's share of the responsibility must be borne by him. Meanwhile, several former and current parliamentarians have been instructed to appear before the Police Investigation Unit of the Presidential Commission. This includes former parliamentarian Sunil Hadunnetti, who is expected tomorrow, former Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe and former MP Akila Viraj Kariyavasam, who are expected on 31st August, and Professor Ashu Marasinghe and Ranjit Madhuva Bandara, who are expected to appear on 2nd September. In addition, former MP Mangala Samaravira and Sivanesthadure Chandrakanthan alias Pillayan are expected to appear on 3rd September, while Minister K.D. Rambukwella and State Minister Dilum Amunugama have been summoned on 8th September.
More news on the other side of this break. Stay tuned.
Enjoy a very smooth shave with the Bic Easy 2 razor. Bic Easy 2.
Welcome back. In more news, at the Cabinet media briefing held today, Minister of Energy Udaya Gammanpilla stated that an interim report on the massive island-wide power outage had been submitted that details measures to prevent and recover from any future outages. The minister also revealed that Prime Minister and Finance Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa has given the go-ahead for amendments to be drafted to numerous tax acts that will create a simple, transparent and efficient tax system to revive the country's economy.
Minister of Energy and Cabinet co-spokesman Udaya Gammanpilla says that the committee appointed to report on the 17th August power breakdown that left the entire island powerless for 8 hours has compiled an interim report detailing its findings.
මේ කමිටුව විසින් ලබා දුන්නේ තමන්ගේ අවසන් වාර්තාව නෙවෙයි අතුරු වාර්තාව. ඒ කමිටුව ගැඹුරු අධ්‍යයනයක් කරලා අවසාන වාර්තාව වෙන විට මීට වඩා විස්තර වලට ගිහිල්ලා මේදි වඩාත් අවධානය යොමු කරලා තියෙන්නේ හේතුවට වඩා යලි මෙවැනි දෙයක් ඇතිවීම වළක්වා ගන්නේ කෙසේද විදුලි බිඳ වැටීමක් වුණොත් ඉතා ඉක්මනින් යලි ස්ථාපිත කරගන්නේ කෙසේද කියන කාරණා සම්බන්ධයෙන් අවශ්‍ය නිර්දේශ තමයි වැඩි අවධාරණයක් කරලා තියෙන්නේ. රජයේ සේවකයෙක් අතින් යම් වැරද්දක් සිතාමතා කළොත් හරි අත්වැරද්දක් සිදු වුණොත් හරි ගත යුතු ක්‍රියාමාර්ග පිළිබඳ අපේ ආයතන සංග්‍රහය වෙනම සඳහන් වෙනවා. එතකොට ඔබ බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ ශනික විසඳුම් හොයාගන්න විදියක් නැහැ. මොකද රජයේ තීන්දුව කටයුතු කළ යුත්තේ ආයතන සංග්‍රහයට අනුකූලවයි.
Meanwhile, Minister of Plantations and Cabinet co-spokesman Dr. Ramesh Patirana stated that except for turmeric and ginger, there are sufficient quantities of all other crops previously imported for public use.
Apart from ginger and turmeric, we have sufficient quantities for all the other varieties. So that is again, it's a short-term crop. So we should be able to fulfill the market within 6 months' time. So we have encouraged, the farmers to come forward and cultivate. If you start importing again, that would be a hindrance to the current process. So that's why we say we'll take it up as it is and we'll encourage people to grow. So we have seen tremendous potential in Sri Lankan agricultural sector. Why can't we go forward? That's the way we have lived over a period of time. Once they get a decent price for their produce, we can further encourage. Then we can go to the next step of exporting them.
In other developments, Minister of Energy Uday Gammanpilla stated measures had been taken by the Finance Ministry with regard to certain acts with the intention of better making a transparent, efficient and simple tax system.
2019 නොවැම්බර් 27 වෙනිදා අමාත්‍ය මණ්ඩලය ඉතා වැදගත් තීන්දුවක් ගන්නවා ආර්ථික පුනර්ජීවනය සඳහා අත්‍යවශ්‍ය කාරණයක් විදියට සරල විනිවිදභාවයෙන් යුතු සහ කාර්යක්ෂම බදු ක්‍රමයක් ශ්‍රී ලංකාව හඳුන්වා දිය යුතුයි කියලා. මුදල් අමාත්‍යවරයා ලෙස කටයුතු කරන අග්‍රාමාත්‍යතුමන් 54ක් 2009 අංක 9 දරන ජාතිය ගොඩනැගීමේ බදු පනත 2006 අංක 13 දරන ආර්ථික සේවා ගාස්තු පනත 2011 අංක 18 දරන වරාය සහ ගුවන් තොටුපළ සංවර්ධන බදු පනත 2018 අංක 35 දරන මුදල් පනත සංශෝධනය කිරීමට අවශ්‍ය කරන කෙටුම්පත් ඉදිරිපත් කරලා ඒ ගැසට් මගින් ප්‍රසිද්ධ කිරීමට ඊ අමාත්‍ය මණ්ඩල අනුමැතිය ලබා දුන්නා. ඒ වගේම 2017 අංක 24 දරන දේශීය ආදායම් පනතත් 2002 අංක 14 දරන එකතු කළ අගය මත බදු පනතත් අවශ්‍ය සංශෝධන සිදු කිරීමට නීති කෙටුම්පත් සම්පාදකට උපදෙස් ලබා දීම සඳහා අමාත්‍ය මණ්ඩලයේ අනුමැතිය ලබා දුන්නා.
The police department stated today that investigations have uncovered a staggering 2.6 billion rupees that has circulated through over 100 bank accounts belonging to drug racketeers nabbed so far. However, the balance recovered and frozen so far amounts to 96.7 million rupees. Meanwhile, the government's war on drugs and the underworld netted more suspects along with stashes of heroin throughout the island today.
The Colombo Crime Division arrested an accomplice of underworld figure Angoda Lokka, identified as Chatura Sujiva alias Keselvatte Krishan, while transporting 3 kilograms of heroin in Orgodawatta this morning. The officers also found 600,000 rupees in cash and 2 checkbooks issued by private banks in the vehicle that the suspect used in transporting the heroin. Interrogation of the suspect has also revealed that the heroin was sold by him after packing the drugs into 100 and 200 gram packs. Furthermore, the suspect, who is a resident of Kesalwatta, was a temporary resident of Avariyawatta in Vattala. It was also revealed that his drug operation had remained under the police radar for the past 8 years, with this being his first arrest for drug racketeering. In the meantime, a vehicle owned by the spouse of the suspect was also taken into police custody for having been used to provide transportation to suspects arrested recently at the Bandaranaike International Airport while attempting to flee to Dubai. In the meantime, the Crimes Investigation Unit of the Kalutara Police Division arrested 3 suspects with 24 grams of heroin in their possession during a search operation conducted in Payagala last evening. Interrogations of the suspects revealed them to be a part of a drug racket operated by a suspect named Chamara Chaturanga, who is currently in hiding in Dubai, and a female suspect named Lakmali alias Kudu Akka, who is currently in remand at the Dumbara prison. What's more, another search operation carried out by officers of the Slave Island Police nabbed 4 suspects along with 100 grams of heroin yesterday. Furthermore, the police also seized a sum of 130,000 rupees, ATM cards, 2 motorcycles and a 3-wheeler in their possession. In another development, the Peta police nabbed the trader at the Manning Market with 20 grams of heroin in his possession. Meanwhile, in Baduralia, 2 suspects were arrested with 5 grams of heroin in the Palanda area by the Baduralia police. In a separate development, a special search operation was conducted today at the Tsunami Flats in Moderavilla Panudura, involving 80 police officers and 2 police sniffer dogs. During the operation, 10 suspects were arrested. In the meantime, the police department said that an amount exceeding 2.64 billion rupees has reportedly circulated through the bank accounts of the drug racketeering suspects arrested in search operations conducted in the western province so far. What's more, a balance of 96.7 million rupees was also found remaining in the accounts frozen so far. Accordingly, steps were taken by police to freeze 102 bank accounts belonging to the arrested suspects. Meanwhile, the Navagamua police arrested an accomplice of late underworld figure Samayang from Ranala today. The suspect, identified as Indunil Vajrakumara alias Inda, had jumped into the Kelani River to escape arrest. Police personnel, however, managed to arrest the suspect despite this and seized 10 grams of heroin in his possession. In another development, a police sergeant attached to the Valikada police station was arrested with 9 grams of heroin and 390 grams of crystal methamphetamine in Damana, Ampara.
An expectant mother has tested positive in Chelau for COVID-19 in Chelau today during self-quarantine and after completing quarantine at the Pumpemadu facility. Health authorities said that all associates of the patient have been instructed to self-quarantine as a precautionary measure. Meanwhile, the country's recoveries increased to 2,830 after 11 more patients were discharged today.
A pregnant woman who was under self-quarantine at her residence has been infected with COVID-19. The lady who arrived in Sri Lanka on the 1st of August was previously quarantined at the Pumpemadu facility in Vaunia. She had then returned to her residence located in Bangadeniya, Chilau on the 15th August after finishing the quarantine process. However, she was admitted to the district hospital in Chilau on this Sunday, the 23rd, due to a respiratory disorder.
අද උදෑසන එය පොසිටිව් තත්ත්වයක් තමයි තියෙන්නේ කොරෝනා තත්ත්වයක් කියලා අපිට දැනුම් දුන්නා. ඒවා අපි අද මුල් ඒරියාව මූලික රෝහලට මාරු කිරීම සඳහා කටයුතු කරගෙන යනවා.
කාන්තාවගේ ආශ්‍රිතයන් විදිහට 15 දෙනෙක් පමණ හඳුනාගෙන තියෙනවා. ඊළඟට අසර නිවාස දෙකක පිරිස් ඒ අයව අපි හඳුනාගෙන ඒ අයව නිවාස නිරෝධායනයට ලක් කරලා තියෙනවා. ඊට අමතරව තවත් අපිට තොරතුරු ලැබෙමින් පවතිනවා මේ ගෙදරට ආවා ගියා ඒ වගේම මේ අය ආශ්‍රය කරා කියලා. ඒකට ඒ අයවත් නිරෝධායනය කරන්න ඉදිරියේදී අපි කටයුතු කරනවා.
Following the incident, steps were taken to place the mother, sister, brother-in-law and the patient along with 2 other nuns in self-quarantine. What's more, a 3-wheel driver who has transported the patient to hospital along with another woman have also been placed in self-quarantine. In the meantime, 11 COVID-19 patients recovered and were discharged from hospital, raising total recoveries in Sri Lanka up to 2,830. With that, the country's active number of COVID-19 cases now stand at 144. In a separate development, 13 COVID-19 infections were confirmed yesterday. Out of them, 10 were inmates from the Kandakadu Rehabilitation Centre, while the remaining 3 were arrivals from Kenya who are undergoing quarantine. Meanwhile, 160 Sri Lankans stranded in Perth, Australia were repatriated, landing at the Mattala Rajapaksa International Airport today.
We'll return after this short commercial break. Don't go away.
Ceylon Bank, the bank with a heart.
Welcome back in your business news. Oil prices were reportedly stable today despite a Category 4 hurricane Laura forcing Gulf of Mexico oil rigs and refineries to close down. Brent crude oil futures for October to $45.75, while the US West Texas Intermediate crude fell to $43.31.
Brent crude futures for October rose by 6 cents to $45.7 a barrel by 0942 GMT. However, the more active November Brent contract was virtually flat at $46.17 per barrel. US West Texas Intermediate crude futures fell 8 cents to $43.31 per barrel. Oil producers on Tuesday had shut 1.56 million barrels per day of crude output from the Gulf of Mexico's production, evacuating 310 offshore facilities. At the same time, refiners that convert nearly 2.33 million barrels per day of crude oil into fuel and account for about 12% of US processing halted operations. Oil prices also shrugged off US crude inventory declines, and signs that gasoline demand in the world's biggest oil consumer were improving. Data from the Energy and Information Administration on Wednesday showed that crude oil stockpiles fell last week as exports soared the most in 18 months and refineries boosted production to the highest rate since March.
Sri Lankan shares ended marginally weaker today as losses in communication services shares offset gains in consumer discretionary and financial stocks. The old share price index closed 0.04% lower at 5,333.32 points. The market turnover was 2.2 billion rupees. Here's a brief report on today's market performance.
We saw a bit of panic selling again from investors, where most retail investors were booking profits from the last few weeks' gains in the market. The market has been down for a few days now. We are seeing a bit of panic selling among especially the retail community. And with that, we saw the market dipping down despite some substantial investor interest from the institutional investors. The overall market dipped by about 2 points today, while the S&P SL20 dipped by 11 points. Today, the overall turnover exceeded 2 billion rupees. So with that, the foreign side of the investors were continue to be net sellers with an outflow of around 357 million rupees, with the overall year-to-date outflow now exceeding 31 billion rupees.
With that, we wrap up tonight's edition of First at 9. Thank you for joining. I'm Shanella Fernando. Have a good night.